I've had the privilege to work with Michael on Threat Modeling Connect, and he is a brilliant threat modeling practitioner that is just mind-numbingly great and also a great guy. Please welcome Michael Bernhardt.
Thank you so much. Well, I feel now honored because aren't I that exactly? I think when Brooke asked me a kind of how would I introduce myself, I intentionally gave you this perspective. There is a hard side of things that I'm doing, and there's a brain side of things that I'm doing. And on the brain side, I'm corporate, and I mean big corporate. That means speaking of corporations which are normally in the 10,000s. And speaking about the developer basis, 10,000. And today, as part of the talk, I want to take you on a travel. That's the hard side. But it leads to the brain side, where I would like to come up with some conclusions, and where I would love to, in the end, maybe having the discussions with you about some conclusions. So, that was to me. I gave you that picture as an introduction. And I would like to take you here in the room, I would like to take you on a time travel to the 16th century. I would like to take you to the Isle of Okinawa, which is now in Japan. And if we were to find ourselves there, then we would see ourselves in the position to see a developing art. And this art was influenced and is driven, the ideas of it is driven by occupation. Occupation by Chinese, occupation by Japanese. Okinawa was a kingdom in itself. And this cultural influence was especially due to the reason that the people of Okinawa were not allowed to wear weapons. That's why they called this art the empty hand. And it wasn't about an art if there's a good model behind the art. We would most likely even not know about this art if there wasn't a good model behind that. The reason, to speak a little bit about the art is the first element of this is Kihon. Master the basic techniques. Secondly, it's what they call kata. That's the sequence, combining the basic techniques as part of Kihon, doing it something greater. And the last pillar, and the most important one, and that's the pillar that you will be judged on if you want to advance in that art, is so-called do. Kind of false friend with the English, but it's do. That's the philosophy behind it. That's the whole, what drives us? Why are we doing this? For this art, the art that I'm talking about is karate, the martial art. And the do is the respect for the others, the resilience in yourself. It's not the picture of a martial art where you attack. And maybe you grasp already, that's my hard side. But that's the storyline that I see with threat modeling. As part of threat modeling, we interact with a community. We interact with people coming from different fields. And in the end, what we want to do is apply techniques. We want to have good ways of guiding through the techniques. But most important, this is what we aim on. Let me do the mapping here. So, first, in section here, in the first section of the talk, I want to see what are we as a community. I mentioned the Threat Modeling Connect community as the threat modeling community. What have we established already? Looking bare metal on that. And what can new practitioners, not sure whether some are in the room, does anyone consider himself as a kind of a white belt beginner of threat modeling here? One, okay, a few hands. So if you go out there, what is the main learning about threat modeling, what you should consider? And it will be not technical. So kind of mapping this to the ideology of karate. First, Kihon, the basic techniques. When I started kind of some 15, 17 years ago, I started first into approaching teams to do security assessments. Well, I read a book by Bruce Nyer as one of the kind of thought leaders in the field on attack trees. And that was magnificent. But then I thought of, how can I get all the information to assemble an attack tree? And it was really that by one guy focusing me or kind of pointing me to the misuse cases. Misuse case. We all know what it is, right? A simple question technique. Nothing very special. That I found, wow, when I apply this, I'm able to extract information from the teams in a very efficient manner. I not have to say, oh, something can go wrong, but I raise it as a question. It has then been the Brooks, it has been the Adams, it has been the ESRs who kind of assembled this in a broader sense, writing books, writing articles, blogs, and whatever about this. And we even counted, we have a NIST standard in a draft mode. But threat modeling kind of was assembled in a broader sense. And then we have the do section, the philosophy behind that. And I think coming to Microsoft blog, that's a magnificent, for those who haven't, or who kind of consider yourself a white belt in this art of threat modeling, read the Microsoft blog. That's remarkable for a company back then, giving all this kind of discussions, having them publicly. You understand the fights that they had internally. That's magnificent. The manifesto, and where we say, what is it? Why do we do threat modeling? We have to articulate that. I see a few faces here who know the manifesto very well. So that kind of maps very well to what we consider with karate. So the question is now, looking from the Threat Modeling Connect community, which is this one place where we want to drive the idea of threat modeling. How are we doing with that? I applied a very old model, word clouds. We love it, right? Centuries ago. But I think that's very neat, and this, what you see here is from the Q&A section of the Threat Modeling Connect. And you see it's kind of the weightage of the words, curated list for sure. And when we look at these, kind of, what do we see? First of all, we see, well, threat modeling is social, teams. We sit together then and collaborate, somewhere is collaborate with them. We interact very actively. Secondly, threat modeling is systematic. That's something that we need in security to show something. We don't want to go the compliance way and going, no, but still we need something systematic. So you find the architecture, the design that we go into. You all find this somewhere here in this kind of, like mentioned, snippet of the Q&A section there. And when boiling it down, it comes with some statement from Adam, where he says we need to be very social, we need to be authentic. Because if we don't, he brought up a statement in saying, we toss around with terms like repudiation as if everyone should know what it means, and sometimes implied they are stupid if they don't. That's a great call. And to outline on that and build a reference to the Hitchhiker's Guide, which is a blog article, if you haven't read this, which sees it from the angle, instead of telling newcomers and saying, what do I need to do to start threat modeling? There's a lot that needs to be done, because you every time deal with teams. And the one team, this works well. The other team, this works well. And then comes the third team, and you start from scratch. You always have to be highly adaptive. So instead of saying what is right to be done, let's say what completely fails. And to nail it down, if we consider us this guy, the perfect armored guy who goes out in security and hammers it and is the only kind of defender of security, then we end up being that. And if, on the other hand side, we consider ourselves being confronted with the army of Marvins. Good luck. Build up your communication. Try to find the security gaps. So, having said that, we could say this was already answer 42, right? We could close it up, stop here. But I don't want to stop here, and that's kind of coming to the second part of the discussion. Threat modeling is there. It provides us the techniques. It provides us the ideas, kind of the exchange basis we also meanwhile have, finding ourselves here in the conference. But the question is, are we doing good enough? The manifesto also says, are we doing good enough? So I'm raising this question also, are we doing good enough? And there I had the privilege to have, with some of the thriving members of this community, to have interviews. And I heard something there. And I wanted to give you, so to say, the condensed version of that. Before I go into that, I want to point to something that I was guided to. Which I think, indeed, I must say that this was missed out a bit maybe, or maybe it was not too obvious. And that brings in the brain part. Threat modeling is all about technology. Hey, most of us are from the engineering field. We do technology. We need to understand the threat. We need to elaborate what can go wrong on whatever is built by the teams. And to do that, we need the interpersonal, no doubt with that. That gives us the perfect foundation. But, and now comes the corporate guy in here. To convey this, we need something more. To build the tower, we need something more. And that is what Adam points out as the organizational. If you miss out on that, we will always be crouching at the bottom. Getting here and there some acceptance, but to really scale it out, we might fail. And thereby, let's have a look again, how are we doing as a community? You remember that picture? Oh, yeah. And now we look, what is associated in terms of organizational? It's not well seen here from the contrast side, but you see I kind of blurred it a bit. So you see measure, value, effort. That are interesting terms. And when reading into what we are writing about it, we write about it from time to time. But do we write enough? And I heard some of the discussion also this morning in the presentations, in the discussions. When talking to the experts from the community, I raised them the question, what is it that you consider is missing, that threat modeling is driven up, scaled up throughout organizations, where we don't have to raise the question, can we do this? Can we spend the effort on that? What is the missing argument? What is the elevator pitch? This morning was somebody raising the elevator pitch question. And 90%, I may even say 100%, the answer was not technology. We have to better explain the tools of the technology. No, there was a different thing mentioned. How do we make it measurable? How can we advertise the value of what we are doing? I need to go here for a second to put up a few quotes. And they were quite magnificent quotes in that. Either, he's not in here, but was saying, he's seeing himself being confronted with the question by teams, by organizations, and saying, should I do threat modeling or not? I heard everyone is doing that. I hope it's not that we are coming down to that level. There is Cohen, colleague of Kim, was saying, threat modeling is a belief that then everything goes right. And I asked him, what's the value that we are selling? Well, sometimes maybe it might be right. Is this enough? Is this enough if you go to your CEO and say, well, it might be right afterwards, right? Sebastian, was saying threat modeling lacks an immediate outcome. Very much true. It does. It's what is kind of, I discussed also with Visa, is kind of we are looking forward. We are not looking hindsight. We're looking forward. We want to protect of something. Brooke, and now I will stumble, that's the tongue twister for me here. Threat modeling is anticipatory. I hope I did this right. You gave me this word. I made it. So in the end, it's really, as an organization, as a kind of an economic organization, you don't want to build something on your beliefs or where somebody tells you, believe in me, we need some values. And what I would like to do is, and I kind of trialed this, I did a little bit of guinea pigging, so to say, with some of the members, with some of the values that we could come up with. Let me bring two up here. First of all, I think it's worthwhile to go into the discussion, the value of a deviation. What's the implication when something will go wrong? Are we good in quantifying this today? I put the relation there to GDPR. GDPR in Europe puts up very tight claims, or how to say this, punishments, penalties, if something goes wrong. Would we be able to do the same for something like, for example, from my threat modeling experience? Once, for example, we had kind of big, you might look up in my vitae, so to say, where I'm coming from, big ERP vendor, and it was building this kind of tax claim solution. And we did a threat modeling there, so the company luckily was very active in the threat modeling activities. And what we encountered is that the team built a perfect solution for the identification, for the registrations of this tax claim solution, where in the end millions of users would use this platform. There was one thing, there was the tax ID that was used in combination with the name as the identification. While this is not so bad, and the team presented us as this is our security solution, we raised the questions, well, tax ID, to which sense is it kind of really private information? Is there any chance that this might be leaked? Is there, when it is leaked, do you hack off your finger, so to say? So the solution did not foresee kind of a dual way of identification check. Is the person that claims to be now the Tanya, the Brooke, Sebastian, or whoever you name this, is that really the person? And if that solution was out, what's the aftermath of the costs that this would have raised? So maybe as an idea there is, could we define for the security breaches, for the security deviations, some kind of a value? That when we do threat modeling, we pull this database, you find this kind of, for example, missing authentication, and then you say you just saved the company a very likely $20,000, $1 million, whatever that is. Secondly, and this I know goes to the heart of the threat modeling community, we are very much bottom-up driven. We want to work with the people and so forth. And now I come with a term top-down. Management-driven, regulation-driven. Right now, threat modeling, you do not find, I heard this morning from the FedRAMP maybe going into that direction, the term threat modeling being brought up in industry standards and in regulations. There is some, the PCI DSS moves into that direction, but it doesn't name threat modeling. Maybe we have to do a better job there. Because only if this kind of the big bosses know that if they want to approach a market, then they have to invest the additional effort, this bulkiness that threat modeling brings in, by regulations, by industry standards, only then also we can at the bottom be active. And yes, it will change for us as a kind of threat modeling community that we have to advise then our practitioners in the sense of how do you work with people, not making it, oh, the upper one said you have to do this, let's do it another compliance work, but by still retaining this kind of, hey, we want to be brainstorming about it. Let's talk on equal basis to each other. It's not that I want to blame you doing something wrong, but we still on eyesight with each other. The other thing is, and there I would, from kind of earlier talks, I would refer to the diversity that Tanya was alluding on earlier. As a security team, we are having different disciplines, so to say. Which are these disciplines? To name a few. Are we acting as a community? Are we acting jointly towards the teams? Are we trying to defend the company always in a union? Try to answer that for your own organization. I see some raising eyebrows. That's a good one. I don't think we do. How about if kind of threat modeling would become the basis for that? What do I mean with that? There's, for example, Nick from RS Tune. He was stating, we get pushback by the management and partly by the teams when we go anything beyond compliance. That already tells there is a compliance security, and then there is something else. Why is that? It's security. We aim for the same. And to pick up the bulky term, Kim was saying, threat modeling is considered bulky in comparison to agile sprints. So what it means, it has an initial investment. The question is, when we combine the benefit that so many disciplines work together on one thing, where they pull out the information, that makes it kind of from a cost of ownership perspective, that's the corporate guy now talking here, much less critical because it's not a one area, not an AppSec domain, but multiple working on that. What does it mean? It could mean that, for example, an incident response team relating to your threat modeling, instead of going to a CMDB and now looking on a flat list of, oh, where is the system and what is connected to, it gets a full picture. What can happen? Where do I have to install additional parameters? Likewise with a GRC team. How much better would be our risk rating if it was solid, on a solid basis? How does the risk assessment work right now in your organization? There's another thing to it, which I find interesting, and it is the question that I'm often asked. Can threat modeling be automated? That's something that I kind of challenged my team with, saying, go check how much it can automate it. And luckily, I really have to say luckily, they told me we can do it. Tooling is an important aspect in that. We can help it to be more efficient, be done more efficient, but automated, we are off track. And I think I also heard this earlier from another talk. So the question that I want to raise is, when threat modeling cannot be automated, and I even think it should not be automated, could threat modeling help to automate the reoccurring processes that are related to security by founding it or by referencing it to threat modeling? With that, I have to say thank you. Have to say thanks for all the interviewees that kind of granted me the time to do that, and I hope this was some kind of a little bit of an inspiration where we as a community could work on. I'll leave it with that.
Q&A?
Okay.
Q&A? We have time for Q&A a little bit, I think. Yeah? Anybody?
So you mentioned PCI DSS and threat modeling potentially coming up there. Do you see the potential for threat modeling to be brought up from an SBOM perspective?
Very good question. Very good question. So first of all, regarding the PCI DSS, it's not mentioned as a term, threat modeling. We have all kinds of variation of different terms, security assurance, security risk model. Let's call it threat modeling. I think that's my first call. Let's get it hammered down, threat modeling. That's the best. We have all the tools there in place. It's not a kind of, oh, I know I have to use an Excel. Let's call it threat modeling. If we can spread out into the communities that we have and say, threat modeling is the term that you should use in the next version of this industry standard. That's the first thing. Regarding the SBOM, there was a time when kind of, we all remember maybe 15 years ago, the massive usage of open source scaled up. And this became a challenge as part of the threat modeling, because out of a sudden teams were like, oh, there's my open source components, and I have 100 more. Can you now threat model this? No, I can't. I think what it can help, what I'm convinced of that it can help, not in finding the bugs in all these libraries, but with the support of something like, for example, the scorecard. I hope this rings a bell. In the combination of a scorecard approach as an input to the threat modeling, where then you can identify the most critical components and can see the parameters around that, the kind of what is this component doing, taking particular spots as part of your threat modeling, thereby making the whole threat modeling process more efficient. And the output then again, helping you in the assessment of what the SBOM is delivering you, and saying, is this the most critical vulnerability that is arising there? Yes or no? I hope that it gives not a full answer, does it help? But I think it's adjacent, it puts it up on the adjacent layer.
You mentioned that the threat modeling possible will be like regulated or enforced as the standard. Does it mean that the people and engineers that work in that industry need to be regulated, like doctors and that?
Now I should you look for the back door, right? The question is when saying from an industry standard, it comes first, we are speaking about industry standards related to IT systems, IT service providers. And I think when considering, for example, PSI DSS is one of the things where you might see that it might be going into that direction. Is the doctor owning the system or knowing kind of how this works? No. He does not. Most likely the doctor himself has, first of all, he decides on a vendor. Let the vendor properly prove that he's PSI DSS with all the threat modeling is applying properly. The second thing is building up the IT infrastructure. Would the doctor do himself? No, he would not. So the doctors would not. But those who build the critical components of our society, those who build up the critical components of the business, so to say, they would be.
Their expertise need to be regulated. Otherwise, they will track the output of the different tools differently, and the outcome of the threat model overall on your product will be different and inconsistent.
Yeah, good question. I think that's a good
That's
question to
what
be
I meant.
answered. I would not be able to digest this now in all aspects. Maybe this might lead to some curriculum, so to say, resulting from that. I cannot go beyond that. I haven't thought on that. It's a kind of.
Anybody else? Great.
I think he said that he wants to bring up a challenging question before. I'm scared.
So I'm actually going to jump in on that previous question. In order for us to regulate practitioners of threat modeling, we, so Threat Modeling Connect community, would have to first come up with what threat modeling is and define it explicitly, which we haven't done, explicitly not done, right? The Agile Threat Modeling Manifesto doesn't talk about, or Threat Modeling Manifesto doesn't talk about, you must do the things in this way. I don't know that regulation will ever get to that point.
So I'm going to jump in here. Something you don't know and is completely unannounced, and Chris Romeo's going to kill me. But you didn't hear this here. A group of people who are related to the Threat Modeling Manifesto, but not quite the same group of people, are in fact working on a capabilities matrix, basic capabilities on what it is. They are. And a couple of those people are sitting in this room, besides myself. So, yeah, unannounced product. NDA. You're all under NDA. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Grant. And we're trying to.
I think we're waiting the flashlight at the door, right? Please look all into the flashlight when you leave the door.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a little thing there, you remember from Men in Black? There's a little guy standing there. Click, just look into the little camera. Oh, what happened? Any other questions? There was one here, sorry.
Well, I guess it's a little bit related to this. Does anyone in the room have any experience dealing with the new licensing process in Singapore for security practitioners? No? Okay, bummer. So far, they're only licensing SOC providers and pen testers, but there will be more to come, I'm fairly sure.
I thought you could just take the ethical hacker course and then hang up your shingle for $1,000 an hour.
Yeah, I guess I'll throw my 2 cents in worth on this right here. Isn't that a slippery slope? If you start regulating and saying who can be threat modelers, then the next step is who can be practitioners of security architecture. The next step is who can be developing secure software, and where does it stop? So that's, I guess, where I view it. It's like, oh my God, okay, this opens up a whole can of worms. And I'm not really sure that any government would have the appetite for that. I don't know.
I'm sure there's a government on the planet that has an appetite for that.
But then it would be like the trades. Then it would be like you hire an electrician, they know what they're doing. They're not going to burn your house down. I've seen so many shitty pen testers. They're like, I pressed scan on burp and now I'm a pen. No, but there's a certain level standard you can expect that you can't expect now. You hire AppSec people, you don't know what you're getting at all. And so that could be developers too, but I mean, like, at least you could. Here's the thing though, is that if we became a regulated industry, maybe we would do better.
Do you mean development?
Tanya, and I'm sorry, you folks, maybe you should get. I'm going to nominate you two to be on this government panel, even though you're. You always take the people who really have strong opinions, and you get them with some people who don't have so strong opinions, and that way you get, a mess of everyone. Any other questions? I think I'm not sure when we're supposed to start the next talk. So
Most likely it.
We're at time now.
Also related to the previous questions, but to anyone arguing against certification.
Can't hear you. I can't hear you right now. Sorry, guys. Can you speak louder?
To anyone arguing against certification, if you're just getting on a plane and it says we only hire self-taught engineers, would you go on?
It's also my point that kind of the question is to which extent can we let kind of the time to market dominate how our society with all the services, what is not run by an IT system anymore. If this becomes too far, the price will rise, but it's a question, should it be even rising? But I hear good discussion. Maybe we can also take it up in a follow-up session and or kind of in the after.
Everybody gets a chance. I'm not looking at the agenda, but we're at time. Supposed to be 30 minutes, right? Oh, so this is the 10 minutes. Okay, well, we can keep going.
Good. Happy to. And let's make this a general discussion. Important to say, not only me here.
Let's Grant or William wanted to go next.
Consider yourself a panelist.
Regulations and certifications cost money, right? And so by implementing regulations and certifications, you actually wind up creating an AppSec program that's not for everyone, because not everybody can afford those circulations. In fact, if I recall correctly, there's even an active movement against getting certified by, I can't remember, it's not ICCP or whatever. There's an organization that requires you to have like either a PhD or some sort of like backing plus an annual cost that is just like way out of like my price range. Like I come from the trades, like my family worked on railroads and in sheet metal. I can't afford to get certified. right, then I'm out of a job, right? You know, many minority communities, right, many underprivileged and underrepresented communities would not be able to be part of this community. So that's just something to consider when we talk about regulation.
Let me challenge this a little bit in the sense. We are talking about the individual here.
Yeah.
Is it the individual? Always, no. Yeah. There's an organization dealing with individual to build something. Yeah. So for sure, as an organization, you can also handle this on the organizational level to put measures in there in place. It's not the individual, everyone, and we talked about the doctor. No, it's not. Yeah. It's more about the processes that you foresee as an organization where you have to assure that there is some kind of a process in place. And that's maybe even the central community. I'm not saying no in this regard.
I would jump in on the same conversation, though, of working in a regulated industry. That's generally how the regulators work, actually. They come to the organization and they say, make the rules you're going to follow. You have to write down, you document your rules and how you're going to do your procedures and processes. And then they come back and check, are you following the procedures and processes that you put in place? So we are in a kind of a self-regulated kind of thing, even with the regulation that we have in a regulated industry. Could it be better? I don't know, but I would challenge that it's fundamentally broken. Like I think it's kind of where it is, and that might be good enough for now. Does every industry need to be that regulated? Not all of them do.
Then I see new people coming in. Thanks so much. Enjoy the conversation. Thank you so much.